Hello and welcome to the Bravas Luxury Living Podcast. Every edition we try and talk about something we think is important if you're going to create the best luxury home. If this is the first time at this podcast, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And even if it's your first time or you're back for another go, please do the stuff you need to do on social media, whether that's the sharing or the liking or the commenting. It not only helps us with the feedback to know what you like and don't like, but also helps other people find out about the Bravas content. So please take a moment, do that, and thank you very much. I have with me, as ever, on the podcast from Dallas, Keith. Hello, Keith. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. A little bit cold, but other than that, very, very well.
So I've been looking forward to this podcast, Keith, since we got it set up, because I think we're an industry with lots of unique people, but today's guest may be among the more unique, if that's not a quadruple negative or something. But anyway, it's my pleasure to introduce Noah Kaplan, the CEO and founder of Leon Speakers.
Nice to see you, gents.
Well, listen, thank you so much for doing this. We've already talked just before we started recording about that strange eye above your head, which tempts me to my first question. What the heck is a painter doing in speakers?
Oh, that's a fantastic opener, Nigel. We might as well start with the eye above my head. It's by an artist named Denial. You'll see some other shepherd fairies, but to this day, it's strange being an artist running a business. And I remember the history of it all, sort of the genesis of Leon. Really, I started as an artist, and my whole life revolved around the arts. And because I am an extrovert and I thrive around people, while I love art, I find it a bit lonesome. And at times it was a bit boring, especially when I was younger, in my college years and even after. So music was always kind of my battery pack. It's what kept me going. And it actually even helped form how I create things. You know, I like to create rhythmically. It really sets the tone of how I paint also. Like, you know, painting to me is about motion and emotion. And to this day, I try to run the business the same way. You know, what is the rhythm of the business? What is the pace? How is the feel? So I'm thinking a little bit differently even as I approach the company now. And really not a lot has changed to this day. We're still, the vision for the business has always been about art and audio. And it's kind of evolved over time to be more about how design and technology kind of interface with each other.
But why speakers? As an artist, you're typically in color and light, not sound. So how did you get to sound?
Great question, too. So Leon was not a typical company. We didn't really form a company when we began. We were sort of a collective of artists. Some of us were musicians. We had philosophers, writers, craftspeople. And specifically, we started recording a lot of music during this time. So not only did I have a passion for listening, but I acquired a habit of playing. And so we wanted to start to look for interesting ways to build our studios and recording setups. We started getting really interested in speakers. One of our first things we did was we actually built a pirate radio station. This is right in our college house.
I didn't know it's pirate radio. I'm used to the UK where the BBC stopped everybody broadcasting, so everything was pirate radio stations. Is that a big thing in the US?
Yes, we were not allowed to do that. We built it on a PVC and we put it was pirate. We built a 30-foot pirate antenna on top of our house, and we started to broadcast, and we did our own show. And eventually, I don't remember exactly how, but we started looking for ways to build studio monitors. We had a studio, and in that building, we noticed there was just this bizarre gap of things to buy that were speakers that felt like they were authentic or natural. And so we somehow got into wanting to build our own. We, just like we were guitar players, we tried building guitars. But it turns out, Nigel, that is very hard.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Speakers is easy?
Turns out. I wouldn't say it's easy, but I'll put it on the easier side of impossible. You know, like being a Lutheran, many years of school, didn't really have a huge interest in going that direction. So the speakers just became something we really got into as a hobby because at that time, this is in the mid-90s, there was a strange sort of gap between what you could buy on the open market and what we considered kind of like authentic and cool for playback and listening. You go to Europe, you have amazing companies, everything from B&W to Genelec, and so Norway, Germany, the UK, all these places, and France have amazing products that they're putting out at this era, and the US has kind of faded back to the background, and we really didn't even know how to buy the right things. So we started building our own. And that's kind of how I got obsessed with not only how to make these things, but what kind of materials they're made with, what they look like, what they feel like, and how they make you feel as a listener.
So what problem were you trying to solve? I mean, if someone said, I guess where you came from, but was it a reference sound? Was it a certain preference sound? What was the sound problem you were trying to solve?
Really interesting. It didn't start as a solution. It started more as a curiosity. And I think all curiosity leads you to what problem you're going to solve, but the approach became more important. For me, always being the art guy, I was the art guy, and even as a musician, I was more of a colorist. I was not there to be the lead. I was there to color the backdrop or to help write the song. And I still am sort of that same character now. But the first thing we set out to solve was kind of a response to this plastic commoditization that we had seen happen in products that were being imported to the US, mostly from overseas. And we sort of felt like they were stripped of soul. And we felt like they needed a lot more character, especially for playback. At the time, it was, if you clicked the very slow internet, by the way, back then, if you typed in speakers, and I could imagine if I do this still to this day, if you think of speakers right now and you close your eyes, you might imagine a bunch of, small black plastic rectangles. They don't evoke a lot of emotion. They're not cool, dare I say. And they certainly just didn't feel natural for playback or vocals. So at the beginning, we were looking for that perfect playback speaker. We tried every woofer, every tweeter. And we really just applied ourselves more, not only just about like the science of how they sound, but the science of how it looks and how it looks on your desktop next to, this was important to us even at that time, because I think I was always into the visual arts. So I approached it differently. I was like, wow, you've created something extraordinarily boring for the most important part of your personality. And I still think to this day, there's so much more that we can do, the way speakers look, how we reincorporate them back into the home, and like kind of how we could talk about the materials that we're designing with instead of the frequency responses where you kind of lose people's interest quickly, right? So what material is it made of? We wanted to use solid hardwood. We still do. We like it to age as beautifully as the day you got it. And we always had legacy in mind, like build something that's built to last. And at that point, I think it was more of a reaction to complete commoditization and the stripping of the soul of products. And that actually became a complete obsession of mine. And if you walk the halls of Leon, you'll see thousands of objects that I've maniacally collected to sort of figure this out. I don't know why I became obsessed with it, but I think there was so many interesting things created from, sort of when Art Nouveau ended and Thomas Edison, you see here, the first products were influenced by Victorian era stuff. So, you find a phonograph made in the 1890s by Thomas Edison. It was always just a miraculous thing that we figured out how to capture sound, how to play back sound. And to me, sound is one of those magical mediums, right? It actually moves your spirit. And that's why I'm still so obsessed with it today.
I think that's really important, especially in an industry where like all of our speakers go in walls, right? I mean, the majority of what we do now is hidden away. And when we pull it out of the wall, there kind of has to be a purpose to it. Like it can't just be a black box. Otherwise, our clients would say, put it in the wall. And I love that you've kind of answered that question, I guess, that you've made something that clients want to see. And when we do have a client say, what are my other options besides just putting it in the wall? You do want to deliver something unique and that has a sense of value beyond just how good it sounds, because everything should sound reasonably good at the price points we're typically talking. So it's interesting to me that you've seen that from the beginning. And
well, Keith, like you said, I know how you think too, like we're all designers in houses, And it stemmed from our passion for sound a lot of the times. But that didn't mean that we were now designers. You know, we were experts at creating amazing audio experiences, but took a long time and a lot of training and working with people and collaborating with people to realize what the problem really is. And like you said, the problem's complex. A lot of the designs are reactions to strangely designed products from the 70s and 80s and 90s when speakers became super large. Kind of the hi-fi movement took over. And then when we tried to distribute that around the house, it just didn't really fit in every room. Whereas you look back to the past, 30s, 40s, 50s, the speakers, the televisions, the technology were kind of like normal things that you saw around the house. You could actually buy them at department stores and plug them in. Mm-hmm. And, they were kind of the feature in a space. And so we still have a lot of work to get back to what will be accepted, how designers are, like your job, Keith, the way you have to design them into every space, and the applications changed so dramatically over the years. It's actually a really remarkable history.
Yeah, it's like we're finally going back to designing for our clients and not for ourselves. Like we put so much emphasis on how it sounded because that's what we in the industry cared about. But what we found out is our clients, once it sounds up to a certain level, how it looks matters a lot to them. And I think we just kind of stopped asking those questions. And you're right, you have all of these things you could go to a department store and buy, and we were appealing to the client because they were going to directly go purchase it for their home. Yep. And then we designed a bunch of stuff for us to sell to them, and it kind of disconnected from that mutual design intent that we kind of see with Leon.
And it's still again, there's still a lot of stereo shops that evolved, especially in New York City when we started. So that era was really deep set era of thinking, and it's just cool to see it all transitioning now and starting these new conversations. And I'm also wondering, think about all these new technologies also that came in to play. You need to be an expert of building a great network now to have great sound. You need to be able to understand how, a lighting load works. Not only, so imagine this, now you're trying to be all the contractors and you're also trying to pick the fixtures at the end of every wire. And that's difficult. It's difficult. And that's why I think, move towards invisible, because invisible is not a design decision, right? It's a good decision for the business. But again, what in a luxury home, because you had mentioned this in the beginning, Nigel, a luxury home, what are you going to find there? You're not going to find a lot of perforated metal and plastic, right? You're not going to find a lot of big brand names and logo tags in your kitchen, right? And so deleting all those things, because a lot of times we talk about at Leon, sometimes, and especially now, design is really about what you don't see, not about what you do see. And it's really hard to understand the concept of contrast or complementing versus hiding or making invisible. They're both ultra important because sometimes you don't want to disrupt a design vision, right, Keith?
And honestly, sometimes the right speaker is now a statement for clients. It does have that kind of retro throwback feel of these can be furniture and they can be seen. They don't have to be hidden away. And I think what we did the worst was we did a really bad job of hiding speakers. We made these ugly plastic speaker grills, stuck them in the ceiling and said, hey, look, it's invisible. But really, it's just ugly. They don't age well. And so I think we are kind of getting to this deflection point where we either want it to be invisible or we want it to be intentional. And again, I think that's why we find these products interesting. And beyond that, AV, going back to speakers and sound, is so refreshing when we've had to become experts on all of these things that are so difficult and so different day to day. And now we kind of just want to go back and play with speakers again sometimes.
Well, I could tell you this was pretty cool. I read a statistic over the holidays that I think 2 weeks ago was the highest number of records were sold ever.
Yep.
2 weeks. And I mean, when you think about that is very heartening because, it's similar to that, to tie this back a little bit to the question you asked of what were we trying to solve? It's kind of intangible, right? And adding back tangibility to life, I think, is so critical right now. there's like a longing for it, right? Music is not just a commodity, and you want something authentic. You want something in your life that you kind of play with, that plays into a visual. It's part of like a normal atmosphere, and something that could kind of help you define your personality. Like on the other side of this computer, we make record players here too, by the way, so this is good for our business, but like, I have a record player, I have a classic Macintosh amplifier, the speakers are made of really deep African wenge, with hand carving on the sides and custom fabrics, and it's all displayed on an 1890s workbench, and that's in my office, and that's kind of the centerpiece of my office, because to this day, just like I was bored when I was 17 about being alone, I'm bored by office life. I'm not an office life guy. I'm a painter to this.
No way.
As you know. And so, I still am jumping around playing records every day. And I really live in a more bohemian lifestyle still.
It's interesting that I remember as a kid, my father liked a certain type of music, and which was jazz, which I got to like as well. But my mother was more classical, and my sisters and I listened to pop. We don't have any kids, but my nieces and nephews, which are the closest thing, seem to like what my siblings like, what our people seem to be much more open to different types of music today than I've ever noticed before. That it's much less generational. Yeah, there's people listening to Top 20 radio for some reason beyond me, but mostly it's much more mixed. And I don't know if that's the increased availability through online services or what's done it. Does that give you challenges in terms of having to produce equipment that has to play lots more different types of music, or does it make no difference to you?
I mean, that's a fantastic question, because often, especially as a musician, or we talk a lot about the sound quality and what it means, and I think availability actually and ease of use easily trumps the quality of how it sounds, ultimately, because first you want to get kind of into the music, what's it about, and make it available. So I think that there's a need for both things to develop still.
Yeah.
You still want better sound out of portable music, but it's so beautiful when you hear something analog from a record. And they both have their place. And what I always talk to people about with music is like, the most interesting thing to me is like, sometimes I'll go and just ask a room full of people, where do you listen to music? Right? And so Keith, like where do you like to listen to music right now?
Well, I have 2 small kids, so in my car is about my only option. But I mean, I will put these on and just kind of zone out and kind of get away from everything for a little bit. But I think that's a really interesting question, because I think one of the things we discovered, I started the industry only 7 or 8 years ago, but what we found was when we sold Sonos products to people, we had given them music back, because maybe having an iPhone in their pocket was too low quality, or an iPod was a little too low quality for them or didn't fit their lifestyle. We would put Sonos in their home and they got music back. And what I found is a lot of those clients are not asking for Sonos anymore. They're asking for that Sonos experience, but they want to improve the quality. They want it to be something they can experience a little bit more. But you're right, that availability opened them back up to music has more of a place in my life than I thought it did. And now that they've enjoyed that, they want to really be able to get deeper into it and have a better experience.
God, I really love how you said that, actually, because it feels good to give people something like I totally can relate to that feeling, because my kids are a little older now. We're a deep partner of Sonos. We design a lot of products to work alongside of the Sonos platform. And it's kind of like, you're creating a new road, and now we got to create really amazing vehicles to drive down that road. And and there's so many different, right. So like, I could definitely remember, because we just moved to a new space, lighting up each room became so much fun. I had never even got to design my own house before, because it was always too late, or as a business owner, you never get to do stuff for yourself. In this house, I really let sort of the kids and my wife formulate what they wanted in each space. And every space had exactly the challenges that you face every single day and that we all face designing into luxury homes. And the coolest thing that happened from this was, we make one product, we specialize in products that really make your TV kind of sound, right, or sing. And we moved over the years to make it not only sound a certain way, but look a certain way, because I think most people buy with your eyes. Like, you don't look at the specs of a Bentley to see like how you look at the Bentley, right? Or when you're buying that G-Wagon, you're buying a G-Wagon because the vibe, the style. So the same thing goes for speakers. So like, this was the first time I was actually showing my own family what's possible and let them drive that car, walking the walk that you have to walk with your customers. And we ended up choosing stuff that I've never had. Number one, like edge media frame in 2 rooms of the house. One is where we watch streaming stuff. Downstairs is where one of the kids, he loves gaming, so he does gaming, and we have a theater down there. And then my wife chose this new product called Ente Tile, which is a speaker it's a flat panel speaker that has the Sonos amplifier in it. And she chose the art, she chose the frame style, and so like our main stereo is a tile of art on the wall. And that's the space that we like hang out the most in. And she's like, now I want outside music, so it's really cool to see it kind of blossom and grow. And I love that thought of giving people back music, because music for us, I think growing up really defined our personality and our friendships even. Like, if you were a classic rock person or a hip hop person, like, that defined a culture, and it defines culture to this day, I think. And I think it's amazing to see culture coming back.
So I want to unpack, because you had a lot of different things in that, and I want to unpack a couple of them, because I want to come back to the sculpture thing, because I think I have 1,000 questions about it. But I want to go back, because one of your first products, as I understood it, was a sound bar. Now, to me, it was interesting that television manufacturers, in desire to produce ever smaller televisions, just about jettisoned their desire to do anything decent with speakers. Like sound was not somehow involved in the experience of watching television.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I find it a lot easier to watch a bad picture than I do listen to bad sound. And
Amen.
And it seemed to open up this opportunity for people like you to come and rethink the soundbar, which is what you did, isn't it?
Again, that was that approach thing. I think because I was always so curious to just listen to. I love hearing the issues that people were facing, and as these TVs got put into the home, all of a sudden this is the centerpiece of the home. We had really never hung technology on the wall. That's an interesting problem in itself, but also. The more I got into it, the more I realized that where our culture had been driving and where a lot of art comes out of is actually from film and video and cinematography and shows and sitcoms. And if you're an American, you spend an average of 32 hours a week staring at this thing. So it became a design focus to me. And I realized that is the place now that we've experienced sound often and the most often, right? These places that we have almost the least technology, right? It's like the speakers, when we first started designing in the late 90s, they literally would take them off and throw them away. That's literally how it started happening. And they were adopted in luxury home, mostly luxury apartments in the city. And when we started designing audio for those, what we were really trying to do is say, hey, we can create high quality sound for you that will do 2 jobs, right? You can have great sound. It happens to be hidden, right, in plain sight. And we don't have to really visually impact the space. So for me as a designer, I wanted the least lines around the home, because at that time, there was either giant tower speakers that people still had. They were pulling out massive CRT mega TVs that were like, tanks.
500 pounds.
Yeah, ridiculous. Throwing about 30-story windows. I don't know how they got them up there, or even those crazy projectors. I don't know if you remember those, with the lights and.
I remember them very well. I remember having to tune them required you to put a long screwdriver between 2,000-volt plates and try and tune them without killing yourself, as I remember.
Oh my God! So yeah, I was experiencing this firsthand, and so ultimately I was like, when I really thought about how people record television, My obsessive nature led me to figure out, what are we doing here? How do you record television? How do you record a sitcom? How do you record a movie? What's the difference? How does Dolby work? How do they record Dolby? Because like I was already so into recording. And so yeah, when you see the sitcom, you see the guy with the boom mic capture, he's not capturing a stereo image sound for you to hear in stereo image, right? So it was a complete disparate technology of how you record music and how you record TV, and then for cinema. So for us, when you're doing cinema, 80% of the dialogue comes from the center channel. So it's like the center channel, nobody even knows what that is, a center channel. We say it so colloquially, but like a center channel, what is that? People want surround sound, right? So how do you create surround sound without creating visual noise? And so to me, I remember asking the engineer who I had met from MIT and the engineering team I was working with at the time, one of the original founders, was like, hey, what if we just put all the speakers in one thin bar right underneath the TV? I'm like, because then it'll serve the purpose of, when you're listening in stereo and when you switch it over to a cinema experience, all that content's coming in the center. And he looks at me, he's like, well, I don't see why we can't. So
never been done before, but
physics be damned.
Right. And I swear that was like, I remember it to this day, because at that time we were literally the craftspeople also, so I took out the router. He helped me design the product. We worked with parts from France, from Focal. We bought I don't think we made money on anything for I think it cost us more to build everything for the first 5 years than we were selling it for. We didn't know how to, we were truly still artisans selling into this weird industry that we did not genuinely understand. It was almost like a day by day, like understanding what was going on, understanding who we were selling to, but everything seemed different. And then the battle became that nobody adopted the soundbar. For 5 years, I became, I don't know how I became.
Thought, by the way, now,
right.
given you can't move 4 inches in any store without tripping over 10 of them.
Yes, and now it's the number one selling audio product of all time. But it took us 5 years of proselytizing, especially to the early stereo shops, that, hey, it's okay, this is not. And so our first ad campaign was a TV, and it said, this is not a stereo. And so treatments of how we treated this thing were very precious to us, because we're like, hey, we know we're putting these, like, when I never saw a luxury space as a young person. I didn't know what the penthouse looked like on Park Avenue, right? So when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is exquisite. Materials I had never seen, book match marble, and here we are trying to chuck speakers it just didn't feel right to me.
But it's really interesting. You said something that I've never really considered, that when you hang your television on the wall, it's like look, we all fuss about the artwork we put on the wall, and we don't all have, great artwork, and some of us it's more meaningful than it is valuable. Well, hopefully for everybody their artwork is more meaningful than valuable. But we fuss about the placement of our artwork. And now we're hanging on TVs, we're going to fuss about that. So, Samsung has their frame TV, but the frames, I mean, we have one, we love the TV, but the frames are pretty, it was an afterthought before the last 5 minutes when they were writing the press release. We better have 3 colors type of thing. Whereas for you've really leveraged that up, haven't you, and said, actually there are textures and colors, and so Samsung Frame TV opened up opportunities for you as well, didn't it?
Genuinely, Samsung TV is one of those stories where it was designed by a famous designer. Yves Bahar really was instrumental in trying to push just the thing to look right, and then in true form, the commoditization happens where you push it out at $99. And again, that's just not what's going to work in a luxury home. Right, Keith? I mean, you see these spaces in there.
Yeah, all the time. And I think it's really interesting. And y'all have kind of covered this, but when the Leon, soundbar came out, the conversation in a typical AV office was, well, that can't sound as good as big speakers. Or well, I could put a bigger speaker if I just throw it in the wall right next to the TV, and then you have this giant perforated grill, on this really expensively finished wall with a plaster detail, and it was like we just didn't grasp what our clients really wanted. We were still trying to give them what we thought they wanted or what we wanted to have if we had that much money. And the Samsung frame, I feel like, was one of the first times where our industry and our clients kind of said, actually, you know what? We both think that's cool.
Yeah.
And I really think it's amazing that like how long you guys had been doing this or been trying to do that, which was to say, just because you hang a TV on the wall doesn't mean it has to just look like a TV hung on the wall. Like you can take another step, but we haven't even talked about media decor and just how far you can go with the fact that if you want to have the convenience of your TV, but you don't want to see it, you don't have to.
Yeah. I love, and there's something interesting in this that is so bizarre that I couldn't describe to people for so long. And we call it the black window issue. Like you said before.
Yeah.
This thing that you hang on your wall, Nigel, which is it is a design conundrum. It's almost a catastrophe, right? You're all of a sudden hanging this enormous black void on the wall. And not only does it not look like it fits, but it's almost an alien that just landed in your living room. It doesn't really work the way we want it to. It doesn't come with audio. You can't really hear it, especially as the room gets bigger, right? So you have a big thing, and then they put little tiny speakers that fire backwards. And then, so you put in a giant luxury home, and we're like, okay, and now we're talking about putting things that are 7 or 8 feet long on the wall. And so, right, with the media decor, the theory is like, we need treatments for these things. So just like you have a window treatment, you wouldn't just slap a window, cut a hole in it to say, okay, we're good to go here. And so to me, I always thought of TV as an appliance that needed to be built in. And, that comes from, my love for industrial design and architecture. I always like things to feel like they're part of the space. And so, but what Samsung started the conversation was, let's kill that black screen. At least let's make it pretty when it's off, which I love. Now, what we're working on now are, these treatments to make your TV look like they're part of a space. So let's add the real wood frames, the gold gilded frames. Let's add choice and aesthetic and fabric and sound and experience. And all of a sudden, there's a lot you can do to either conceal or make that TV actually look like it's an important part of your house and that art is hung properly, right? Because you don't always want to see this black window. And you sometimes, if you're in a really high-end home, you also don't want to see a digitally produced piece of art, right? That also doesn't really have a space, but I'm happy about it because it started a new conversation about digital art, which I've been obsessed with for a long time too, and I want digital art to come to the forefront.
But there is a big difference between the digital art. I know we should be talking about sound, but there's a big difference between the digital art and a picture recreated. I like my photograph. I'm okay taking photographs, not as good as Keith, maybe not as good as you, but my best pictures still sucky on their frame compared to a piece of artwork. I mean, the feeling is completely different.
I always say one is like it's like a screensaver versus an emotion.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it took me a long time to realize and I think it's because of my obsession sort of with the history of technology that, every day I walk by in Leon, we have a 1957 Philco predictive TV right in the front hallway. And, that's a handmade television. The Philco, factory was in Pennsylvania. It had a beautiful cabinet that it laid on. It had integrated sound. It had a tube amplifier. It had a beautiful picture, a CRT screen, and it was on a beautiful brass bent bracket. Amazing fabric on the front. It's totally period centric, so it looks like it belongs in a 50s home, and had one plug, and it was intrinsically beautiful to start. So it was an object, and I hate to sound fancy, but it was an object of art, right? It was an artistic piece in itself, so when it was off, it actually looked like it made sense there. And I walk by that every day to remind myself that I don't know if we've evolved or devolved, because that did have wireless TV on it, right? You had an antenna and it had wireless radio. You didn't need any apps, and you could go and love it and plug it in, and it worked. And just to turn on these damn TVs now, you need a degree. You need Keith and not his best team to show you not how to make. And so like we have to create the perception of simplicity, but I can't wait. I want that time again when it is simple, when it is a simple decision, when it is a beautiful. So the things we're working on today, we're hoping to like create that turnkey experience where it's just like, it looks beautiful, it feels right, and we're going to be able to place it easily. And right now, that only can be done through an integration or an architectural lens, right? We're going to be working with designers. We're going to be working with both interiors and architects. And so we all have to learn that language together. And so that's been a cool journey to like, because even me as a painter and a musician, you know, I'm a dirty pirate. You know, I wasn't trained in the, you know, like all of a sudden you're putting on the booties and the footsie things and like walking around fancy, you know, like that was a completely different experience for me. But now I've learned to genuinely appreciate all that work and how much craftsmanship it takes to build these homes and how much creativity it takes. And what I love about this industry is the extreme amount of creativity that people put forth to give you, back to Keith's thing, to give you back music, to give you that cool experience, to make that shade come down, to make your life feel right and to make you feel like you're a part of that space. You know, it's pretty intense.
A good example of that to me is sound sculptures, which, you know, I don't think if you came, you know, if your life was wrapping, you know, copper cable round magnets to create speakers, you wouldn't have come up with a sound sculpture. So, tell me where that came from. Well, first of all, you should probably explain what it is and then say...
I should explain, and this is so weird because, so a bit of the background of Leon, I was a full-time musician and artist at the time, and I had a gallery called Noah's Underground Gallery, and I shared that gallery space with the Leon speaker team, who I was also a third part owner of. And so we had a gallery and this crafts, like artisanal speaker shop where we handmade all the speakers. And to figure out how that all worked together, there was a frame shop upstairs. And the first product we designed was called Picture Sound, and that was, you know, a frame that had flat panel speaker and you could choose the art. But I was kind of struggling with this, like these shapes seem so boring, you know. So one of the first things I did was, because I was into carving wood at the time, you know, I cut these interesting shapes out and I asked the audio guys to like help me design something that showed the speakers in a beautiful way. So one of the first things we did together collaboratively was like build this thing that we ended up calling a sound sculpture. I actually gave it to one of my friends from the Bronx, and he still has it to this day. He moved to California. He still has this thing up, the original Leon sound sculpture. We didn't unearth that thing because the challenges and the problems for the next 15 years were so extreme. You know, building factories, meeting demand, you know, trying to figure out how to run big machines. Like, you know, we lost track of like that really weird niche. And then I realized about 10 years into the business, I found myself as the sole owner of the company. You know, my two other business partners had moved away. We needed to create a new vision for the business. And I won't say that I planned this, but the natural thing that happened was I'm like, let's create something that has never been created. And I don't know, Keith, if you've ever seen the first sound sculpture we called the Dragon.
I don't know if I have.
Yeah, I'll show you the Dragon. We actually toured this thing. But it was a 17-foot long, true to scale imperial dragon. And it was made of metal. And it sounds like it was done in like almost like a tattoo form, so kind of radical.
Yeah.
And we hid all the speakers behind it. And so inadvertently, like the entry back to art for me, like I think I spent like 10 years as an artist trying to figure out how to be a business guy, right?
Yeah.
And then I think I spent the last 10 years trying to figure out how to be a business guy getting back into art. And so the sound sculpture became that vehicle for me. And where that evolved to, you know, because that was more of just like a showpiece, like, hey, let's break suit. Let's create something, like, let's take creativity to the next level. Then we kind of productized that because people saw it, and then we started getting inquiries. Well, can you make my logo into something interesting? Can you create something interesting in my house? Can you make something that moves? Can you make something that incorporates light? And so we did a lot of inquiry-based design for a while, and then all of a sudden, as Sonos and these new technologies came to light, we wanted to create objects that were visually stunning And one of the first sound sculptures that came to be productized was because a restaurant came who had an art budget and an audio budget, but they didn't really have budget for both. So I got called in as a designer. They're like, Noah, we have about X number of dollars. We're really kind of at our wit's end here. And so we decide for this beautiful restaurant, the first sound sculpture, which incorporated hidden speakers, sort of sculptural elements that we had cut out of wood on the CNC machines, ambient lighting, and it was all simple to control. So it was kind of a plug and play way, and it was on a concrete wall. So it had to, number one, be functional. It had to serve as a piece of art, and it also had to serve as the general sound system for the whole space. So I looked at this thing, and to tie this back to before, when my first ad campaign was like, this is not a stereo, I was like thinking, what are we looking at now? And sound sculpture was what people started calling the thing. And now we have in our catalog, in our price guide, we shipped 2 sound sculptures out last week, all custom made. And now I'm just always looking, like on my desk, you'll always see interesting new materials to build out of. I'm always searching for new color forms, what can we build out of? And it's a conversation that started now. And all of a sudden, we're designing these pieces, and because we're pulling from multiple budgets and multiple things, it really takes you into that luxury space, and especially into the luxury commercial spaces, because we find a lot more of these happening actually on the commercial side, where commercial projects are generally driven by architects and designers. So when they see it, they're like, oh, I need that. I need that in this lobby. I need that in this restaurant. I need that point of interest. And
that's funny.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that combining budgets idea, like we've kind of seen that with acoustic treatments lately, which is modern construction has a problem. Every material's hard. They sound like those houses are awful to be in, and we can now solve a problem, add decoration to the space, make it look better. And we've combined those budgets into something that becomes way more valuable. Like instead of having, a fancy wall treatment over here and some acoustical panels up there, why don't we just do a beautiful wall treatment that's also your acoustic panels? And we're solving this real need, still adding to the design of the space. And I think finally, one of the things Leon allowed us to do was work with designers, not against them. And these are I think it's now revealed to us, we have all these new tools to start working with the industry and not just alongside the industry. That's kind of I saw you hold up that acoustic treatment. I'm like, ooh, I want Leon to get into acoustics. That would be great.
Look at Art Novia, what they've done. They have such beautiful pieces. Like I didn't really care about the acoustic properties of some of it. I was just like, I wanted it for this one wall, and I'm like, it's great that it does the sound thing, but being a customer is I realized through being a customer, or like Nigel said before, you realize how decisions are made, and they're made through your eyes. They're made by an emotional response, and I think we're really at that turning point. The next chapter has started. We're only on the first, we're on the first couple of pages of the chapter. But I think that next chapter is unfolding right now, and the industry is evolving in such an amazing way. The projects, the calls I get are hysterical, for and what I love is I do not know what's going to happen any day. I each day is a new challenge, and I find myself even in this era where we're not traveling a lot, that I'm designing with most of my thing. I'm drawing with pen and paper almost all day again, and most of these concepts can be designed and talk through. And the next vision for Leon, I can tell you, is really about having more fun with materials, doing more unexpected pieces, getting to the foreground to show people. Because, once you show people, they're like, I got you, I get it. And when you think about it, from a media decor, Nigel, which is, these are things that we know, where we make, rolling art screens, or things that move, things that have motion, or things that incorporate light, a conversation that we have all the time, but a customer has never seen. When we do talks for interior designers and we do classes, we'll show pieces and they have never seen any of it. And that's a great opportunity, and it's also a great challenge.
It sounds expensive as well. So I'm expenses are relative. If you own I saw a Park Avenue, or one of the new apartments in New York, they were selling like 4,000 square feet for $29 million. So I guess everything is slightly relative. But
Correct.
The entry point, though, is probably not as high as people think, is it?
No, we want to make things accessible, and we certainly only charge what we believe is the real value. That's why we use, real black walnut, real white oak, real recycled materials, only the finest parts. But we value driven is still our number one thing. We want Leons to last, but you're talking about, you could start at a few $1,000s, $2,500, $3,000, so it's not outlandish prices. The really amazing thing is the contractor's value work. When you think about designing a new kitchen or a new, that's amazing. You think what you're really paying for, you don't really care about how much the appliances cost, right? You're thinking in a much different way. What is the finish? What is the end result? What is the outcome going to be? And so we're trying to move more into a furniture and fixtures mentality. So you'll see, when we come out we're not coming out with a spec guide. We're coming out with a lookbook.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think one of the favors that Samsung and Amazon and Google, I think, have done for us is our industry came up with a lot of great ideas that we weren't ready to fully execute on. And then they've kind of brought those to the forefront of people's mind. Like, the frame is gorgeous. And for 90% of people, it's all they'll ever want. But a lot of our clients see it and go, that's a great idea. How can we execute it better? Well, they're coming to the industry that actually came up with all those ideas in the first place. Like,
Right.
You were trying to figure out how to make a TV look better on a wall before we had the technical capability to make the frame TV.
Sure.
And now with companies like, I think Josh AI is probably another good example of someone who's just said, we came up with an idea, the mass market took it and ran with it, and now it's back to us to do it so well that top percentage of the market is going to see it and understand the value they're getting. And I don't think Leon's products should ever show up in Best Buy. It's just not made to do that. But at the same time, we look back on projects where we thought, well, that client's not going to buy a Leon soundbar, and we just did a generic, this 40-inch soundbar that goes under a 65-inch TV. And we look back on those projects and we're embarrassed because we weren't selling the value of this client can afford that, and they think it's crazy that their $2,000 TV has a $3,000 soundbar.
Right.
But a few years from now, that $3,000 soundbar is still incredibly valuable to them, and that TV's been thrown away or put in a kid's room. And I think we've as an industry started to provide real value.
I love that you said that. Well, what's really cool about what you said is that, and this is something we didn't even really understand or predict, was right. Like when Samsung came out with that, we got a lot of calls like, "Oh no, what are you going to do about media decor? This is a big issue." And I didn't really honestly think too much about it, but what I can tell you is that it did completely propel forward. Instead, it did exactly the opposite of it didn't compete with it. It propelled it forward. And so media decor is growing faster than ever all of a sudden because it started the conversation, right? It's now
At
saying
scale. Yeah.
Yeah, at scale. Like, what was it going to look like? And I had to rebuild this factory 3 times, the paint booths here, because the TVs used to be 42 inches TV. That was the big deal. Was the 65. Our average size TV that we build for now is a 75-inch TV. And so when you think about the objects you got to make and the rooms that they're going in and the scale, and especially when you have big, like you said, all those hard surfaces, you have to scale to those homes, so things that you're going to buy off the shelf are just not going to cut it, right? When you're talking about, a 3,000 square foot great room and, you're putting a teeny tiny little plastic thing that's $400 or $500, it's no. And so we do, like you said, the value is so important to us still. And so is legacy. We also don't want to just create a bunch of crap that can't get reused. So every Leon, by the way, is for life. It's not only built for life, but we have a reuse and recycle program. If your TV changes, we will rebuild and grill for you. We don't want you to throw it out. We want it to be part of a permanent thing that you could kind of hold on to. And certainly, you're not going to stop at that first installation, right? You're going to evolve. And so I always, when I'm talking to designers or integrators, I'm like, this is one of those things that you stare, like, even though I'm a big art lover, like, what if I might be in front of screens more than anything else in my life. So if you do it well and this was I've had some amazing experiences over the years of like when it's actually like, oh my God, it's a aha moment. Like I have to put a TV treatment on every TV, period. I remember talking to one integrator. He's like, I can never present this, even if the customer doesn't say yes, I'm never going to present it without it. And it was really cool to actually see that happen, and then him buying into it, putting one on, and then the customer, who happened to be an architect, said, I have hated seeing the side of the TV. It's what would be my pet peeve. It was the same, he had the same problem that I had. Like, I don't like seeing all the messy wires and the things and the blippy boxes. And that's why we created the edge frame. You know, the edge was just so, I didn't want to see the edge of that. And once he did one, he did the next and the next and it turned out, and now we're probably 3 houses in with that same architect. And now he knows how to think about it. And sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. In the kids' room, no, it's fine. Put it in with the whatever off the shelf thing, and it's fine for that, and that's great. But when you have to provide the value, it makes sense. Like, hey, where are those spaces we're really gonna be spending time?
We did a penthouse, and it had a 98-inch TV being hung on the smoothest, most beautiful black walnut wall you've ever seen in your life. And to just hang it there by itself would be a crime, And so I'll help just trim it out with a black walnut edge frame that fit beautifully in the wall. And as soon as the designer saw it, they're like, well, I wish we'd thought of that. Like it was like, awesome. Why have we accepted that the TV should just hang there?
Chuck it on the wall. It's like,
why were we okay with that for so long?
It drove me crazy, but it's just like, I think before it used to drive me more crazy, because remember they used to have these like big, silver was really in for a while. Like I was like, can we stop with these giant silver bezel things?
Or curved TVs. Let me show off the back of the TV to everybody that walks around it.
Curved TVs. And we had to make curved sound bars, of course, for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then try to figure out how. I was like, when those curves came out, I was like, I became a wall designer. I was like, you can't just put that. I was like, you got to build something that's gonna go.
I've sold one curved TV that was actually a good idea, and it went on a curved wall, and it looked beautiful. And I was like, if they just marketed it as the TV for the curved wall, it'd be a great product. I'm in.
Oh, weird.
Guys, I'm guilty now that I bought a curved TV, so I'm saying nothing. I don't have it anymore. I've gone back to a boring plain flat TV.
I was going to say, tell me it's at least 200 inches wide.
Yeah, I'd like to tell you that, but I have to tell you,
screen.
I like looking at the back of my gadgets. My wife, not so much. So I think that's... So that may... Listen, guys, I suspect this conversation could go on forever, but we're coming close to the time. It's been a great conversation. I think a really important learning thought for many of us. But before we go, and before we let you go, Noam, we're probably going to invite you back because I suspect we've only scratched the surface of some of this. There is a sort of game that we play with our guests just to try and end the podcast with a bit of fun, where we ask them 3 questions. Which, yes, these are rapid fire type things, which might be really interesting or really stupid. We'll find out. The first of which is there a piece of home technology that you have in your home that you think you now couldn't live without?
Oh, yes. But it is definitely my Sonos system. Like it's Leon driven, like all the endpoints are Leon, but like the Sonos infrastructure there, like I am completely that person who went on that journey, and now like I have to have it no matter what. Like I feel weird when I don't. When I go to another place, I'm like, how does this house work?
It's too quiet.
Where's your music?
It's too quiet. Yeah,
it's too quiet. This is creepy.
Makes me anxious.
So when you think about all the hundreds of jobs you've done, is there one that stands out that you go, if there was only one I could ever have done, I'm glad it was that one?
Oh, we have been super lucky to do a lot of incredible work. I think that probably for me, like on the commercial side, we do a lot of commercial big projects, and one of the most interesting ones I would say was we were charged with redesigning the sound system and all the systems for Muscle Shoals Recording Studio.
Wow.
Alabama. Yeah.
Oh, but as a musician, it doesn't get much better. I mean, Abbey Road maybe, but
Right. It was like we were like, yeah. When we got hopefully when we got that call, we're like, you want us to redesign all the and right. That is that call. And they didn't want to change it, and they wanted all period centric, right? So, and at that period, like, it was redesigned maybe in the 70s. So 70s is some of the most bizarre time in American design. That was like when brown and orange and tweed was
lime
cool.
green.
Yeah.
Lime green. I mean, so we found all new old stock to build out of. Like, wow. We framed the TVs with special TVs to make them look like they were CRT TVs. We sourced all the fabric from literally the period of the 70s. Like, some of the speakers we made out of like wood paneling, to make it seem like kind of like that retro but borderline cheesy kind of design from that era. But we snuck in like the most ridiculously high fidelity parts you can imagine. So, you pull off the grill and you're seeing like, handmade Norwegian Seas parts, and like beautiful parts inside. But yeah, redoing that whole space and then being able to tell that story. And now it's a museum, so you can walk there, mm-hmm. and you might not notice, but if you look hard enough, you'll be like, when you take off the grills, it was one of those projects kind of like defines an era for us and defines like what we want to stand for.
That's a great example. And finally, is there a piece of technology that you don't have that you would like invented? Is there a problem day to day you think, if only?
Wow. A lot of my problems are in the kitchen, right now for me. Like, I spend a lot of time
finally
in the kitchen, right? I love to do that. Like, I love hanging out there. I think that the next things that I want to work on or that I think that would be useful would be to try to create kind of tactility back for things that seem, like invisible, things that are like, I know everybody loves voice control. I really haven't used it that much because I don't know where to put it. I don't know how to make it work. So I would love to see like that new Josh dot. I think that's a really good form of new technology that looks cool enough where I might want to talk to that thing. But right now, what I'm hoping for are really more things that would impact environmentally than anything else. Things that would talk about air quality in the house. Things that would, think about light from another. Like, how do we bring some of the things that we've learned into the actual house, and not just into the highest end homes in the world, but to our normal life homes. And so, like, I'm super interested right now in just like environmental air quality, biophilic design. So like, how do we bring more plants and better air, cleaner water? Those kind of things are like what I would love to make pretty now.
That's brilliant. Well, listen, Noah, that was a fabulous conversation. I look forward to another one another day. But for the moment, thank you very much.
Gents,
thanks,
been a
Noah.
pleasure. Thanks so much. Good to see you as well.